All right. All right.
Microdose, time for
We're microdosing moon math today, Max Kaiser.
Microdose, time for microdose.
Uh-huh.
Microdose, time for microdose, time for microdose, microdose.
We're microdosing moon math today.
Moon math.
Moon math, because that is what it was called when Citibank says Bitcoin is going to $318,000 within a year. And of course, Bitcoin is heading to the moon right now.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's all very interesting. You know, the big Wall Street banks are coming on to the Bitcoin story. This is the first time in history that the average person got a chance to front run the big guys. Never in history has it been possible for the average person to put up $100 and end up with $1 million, as we've seen now with Bitcoin, before the Wall Street banks, the institutions, everyone else comes in. And the window is still open. You know, the window will be open all the way up to $100,000 per coin. And then I think that we're going to start to see a much different type of environment.
How do you like Max's outfit? He's got a new vest here.
Yeah, I got this vest a few months ago, and I haven't worn it yet. You know, this was going to be in my, but I was going to do a Mexico City live event. I was experimenting with different vests. And so I thought, you know, I'd try it out here, see what it's like.
I think you kind of look like a New York City hitman, like somebody from the Italian.
Yeah, the
American
30s
mob.
gangster era, you know, was really a high fashion point in men's fashion. Definitely the gangsters of the 1930s in New York and Chicago. That was a very stylish period.
Right. So I'm heading over to our Twitter handle. And so while I'm doing that, you know, Twitter just changed everything. And stop all of the stuff you have at the top. Right? I need to switch over my account. I know this is exciting for you, but, you know, it's my show.
And you just live I'm talking now.
Right. Watch Microdose. Sorry, I have to fill in the time, you know, fill in the space for you. Microdosing. We are microdosing moon math. I'm going to write. We are microdosing moon math. So, if I could stop auto-correcting. It's all one word, okay? Moon math. Damn it. Okay. So, you know what? We just finished our interview yesterday. We did it with the rock star Sean Lennon. We did it a bit earlier than usual, what we're due for Orange Pill podcast that airs on Sunday. The full episode right now, you're watching the microdose. And we interviewed Sean Lennon, and it is mind-blowing. It's almost 1.5 hours long, and it is so good. Your brain will be blown. What did you feel about it, Max?
I really enjoyed it. You know, we've known Sean for 10 years or so. We've been chatting on and off for years, and we have many topics we've been talking about, including Bitcoin. So this was just a very, you know, catch up on what folks are thinking about in terms of art and Bitcoin and social media and politics and history. And so, yeah, it went really well, really enjoyable. I think we're going to do more for sure.
Yeah. Well, like we said, Sean's kind of like a Renaissance man. I consider him a Renaissance man. And we did that. So, you know what? Last night, as Bitcoin was heading up over 18,000, one of our old friends, an old acquaintance, we're very good friends with his father, Ricardo Salinas Pliego, he announced that, you know, he's worth about $12 to $18 billion. And he announced that, well, he's got about 10% of his liquid portfolio in Bitcoin, and that rippled across the Bitcoin space, of course, because every time somebody who is a billionaire or somebody very famous talks about Bitcoin, it sends ripples through the Bitcoin universe. Of course, it's going to happen on Sunday, by the way, when you hear from Sean Lennon, because he's been orange pilled since 2011. So I think people will be surprised to hear that. But he's kept that on the lowdown. We've, of course, known about that. But here we have Ricardo Salinas Pliego. He's the second or third richest man in Mexico. the 110th richest man in the world, worth 12 to 18 billion. His dad, of course, tried to talk us out of talking Ricardo into buying Bitcoin. That was in 2015 when we were there. We had a lovely lunch, an amazing lunch at TVS Teca in Mexico City with Ricardo Salinas Pliego, and Max tried to talk him into Bitcoin. And what do you feel about what he's done, Max?
Well, this shows you that Bitcoin is a global phenomenon. People from all over the world are getting into it for the same reason. They're frightened by what's happening in the world of fiat money and central banks, and they see that the money printers have gone absolutely out of control. The money supply numbers have gone through the roof. Indebtedness around the globe is going crazy, and people want safety. They want security. They want to store a value. And Bitcoin is the fastest horse in the race. Why not store your value in something that's going to go up 10, 20, 30, 40x? Might as well. There's no downside. It's unconfiscatable. He made a point of this. He said, look, this is wealth that is unconfiscatable. And in Latin America, of course, has a history of all kinds of inflations and wealth confiscations, as we have also in North America. And so that was a point he made. He said he read the Bitcoin Standard by Saifedean Ammous, and it made a big impression on him. Of course, Saifedean was a guest on our show many times, and we've been pushing that book hard ever since it came out. It's a key book. We did kind of introduce Ricardo to Bitcoin in 2015. We told his dad, Hugo, about it in 2012 when we were there in Athens, Greece. We were trying to get the government to work with Hugo about a silver standard, and we took the jet. We got some photos on Hugo's jet, very nice. And so this is just another billionaire falls in line. So anybody, that's he's number 110 on the world's global rich list. Everybody from 1 to 110 is going to be in Bitcoin to some degree. Everyone from 200 to 1,000 is going to be into Bitcoin to some degree. Everybody who's got any wealth at all is going to be into Bitcoin to some degree if they want to preserve that wealth. This is happening pretty much as the Bitcoin bulls and Bitcoin maximalists have been saying now for many years. So this is, on one hand, it's surprising when you see it actually happen. But on the second thought, it's like, well, this is exactly what should happen.
Right, right. So I'm feeling like that vest is not as cool as the handmade one. It doesn't fit as well. So that's my instinct. What do you
Well,
feel?
don't freak out about it. You know, this will just be an experiment. I'll look at the video and see what I think.
Right. So, we hit 6,000 today on the Orange Pill Podcast Telegram group, and you were written up. You guys are all famous in Bitcoin Magazine. Nozomi Hayes wrote an amazing piece. I had no idea she was writing it. She was writing about this, U.S. political system and the farce that is our democracy, and which is a shadow of its former republic. And what she said was that, here's a new paradigm, a new way of living, and it's Orange Pill, and it's Orange Pill Podcast, and it's Orange Pill Podcast Telegram group. And, I think it's pretty impressive. I have to be like a Finnish, babushka sort of woman every once in a while and go in there and with my paddle and spank some of the kids. They get unruly, but for the most part, it's pretty tame. It's pretty interesting, and the conversation is good. I have to keep a track on this Focusrite, our thing for our audio interface. Sometimes it's started to go out. I read that this is an issue that does happen. It's like I need to update the driver and stuff like that. There's so much in technology,
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff to constantly be doing. That's why there's a big job for sysadmins. That's what they do for a living, sysadmins. And I don't mean SIS, I mean SYS.
Oh, we're looking for a topic. What do you want Madge Weinstein to talk about? Speaking of cis, she's not. I don't know what she is. Well, she's a bloated lesbian. Okay, let's put it that way. And the fact is, we need some content for her. She's kind of like, sludgy brain today. This past week, she's down in Florida, hanging out on the beach, looking fat on the beach and stuff like that. And well, she's up for doing some content because people keep on complaining. They're like, "Where's Madge? Where's Madge? Where's Madge?" And Madge is like, she's got all her, equipment to film down there, But if you have something for her to film, any content, any topic you're interested in hearing from her, or
Wow.
maybe a girl talk or a boy talk, like,
Oh, I didn't know that she was looking for material. That's interesting. I wonder what she'll do.
well, it's unusual for such a comedian, right? Like, I mean, the way she kind of operates is she just goes on Twitter and poops, right? And then she records the sounds. But, that's not really orange pill sort of content,
Mm,
right?
well, not, I guess, what we're saying is that it's not, so I guess yeah, I don't,
Maybe she's like the Leonardo da Vinci of poopers, because we do talk about Leonardo da Vinci on this weekend's. And I was talking. I realized last night I woke up in the middle of the night because it was either a fox or a coyote was making some crazy noises right outside the window, and then I realized that when we spoke to Sean, I said Leonardo de Medici because obviously I was like we were talking about Leonardo da Vinci,
yeah.
and instead of Lorenzo de Medici, I said Leonardo. And then I realized it in the middle of the night. And I was like, oh man, like I need to fix that.
I woke up in a cold sweat.
Yeah, over something so stupid. But it's a way to engage people, right? Like if you do like if you're on Twitter and you're like writing about the Great Fire of London in 1777, right? Obviously it was 1666, but people will like immediately engage with you. No, it was not 1777. It was 1666.
Yeah, it's gaslighting, right? So gaslighting always works, and it always gets engagement for sure. I think that's right. That's right.
Let me see. Speaking of engagement, I'm going to come look at you guys.
Yeah, do it.
Hi, Max and Stacy. Hi. Get the
Yeah.
fuck out of here, Sam.
What?
Somebody, I don't know. There's a fight breaking out in there.
Oh no.
Trump is not leaving. Miss your Bitcoin t-shirt today, Max. Um, yeah. Say something interesting. Keep the pimp hand strong. Greetings from Namibia. Umbili. Umbili.
Oh, nice.
Umbili.
Nice.
Umbili.
Very nice.
What am I saying? When I say Umbili, what am I saying? That's what I need to know, because I could be saying something really embarrassing and people in Namibia are laughing at me. We get those beautiful photos every morning in the Orange Pill Telegram group from Namibia, and it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And I was up like 5 o'clock in the morning on the group and reaching out to our Australian friends. We got a lot of Australians checking in. This is always nice. We've had fans in Australia now for 15, 16, 17, 18 years, and it's good to connect with them. And they're all coming into the Orange Pill chat room for sure.
Maury Ballstein's back, and he says the OPP memes and stickers will be the greatest store of value after Bitcoin. I think that's true.
Absolutely. That's better than a, Mickey Mantle trading baseball card.
We should auction off, or we should get a line of Guillermo's.
Oh, right. Guillermo, yeah. There he is. There's Guillermo.
I remember that so well. Where did we actually get it though? Like, I remember we were staying in the Four Seasons in Mexico City, and we had that lovely, French windows out into the courtyard, and having Guillermo, like up on the desk near the window. It just looked so, it was so nice. Like, I love Mexico City.
Yeah. I think I got it on a street vendor. It just reached out to me like, take me. So that's what happened.
I really want to go to Mexico City. We should get this guy Ricardo Pliego, Salinas Pliego. We should get him. Oh, where's Plucky? Somebody wants to know where Plucky is.
Plucky is high up in the shelves there.
I'm gonna get Plucky for you.
Oh, there he is.
I'm feeling generous.
There's Plucky.
Here, I'm a central banker. Yeah. Speaking of central bankers, I heard that Biden wants to appoint Janet Yellen as a Treasury Secretary, which There's really no point for the Treasury Secretary after this CBDC comes in, this central bank digital currency. They're planning on just doing an end run around the Congress, around the Treasury, around the U.S. government. We, the people, we're basically they're going around us, and they're just going to start issuing digital currency. Everybody's going to get an account at the Fed, and they're going to give you free money. That the free money, the free drugs is what they offer you to give. Come over here, give us your name, address, your identification, all that stuff, and you'll get free money.
Right, right. Well, the election was a big relief, really, because now I am completely detaching myself from, I think that was the end. That was from 1776 to the year 2020. That was a great run, America. Congratulations. It looked great. You did well. Now it's post-America, post-dollar, post-nation state. It's all orange pill now, orange pill nation. And I don't, I muted everything having to do with the current crowd in Washington. They're meaningless. They have no power against Bitcoin, and the world is going to a Bitcoin standard. And there's a global hash war breaking out, as the some dude in Washington was saying, the controller of the currency, right?
The comptroller of the currency, yeah, Brian Brooks, I think his name is. Yeah, he was interviewed. We played a clip on the next Kaiser report, but he was saying like he gave some erroneous information. He said China controls 51% of the hash rate, and Bitcoin is Internet 2.0, and the United States needs to control it. So basically, he's kind of suggesting your hash war that you're saying was going to happen. You've been warning about this for the last like 2 or 3 years.
Right. So the controller of the currency is saying that America needs to start mining Bitcoin and hoarding Bitcoin, or it's because this is the new reality that he called Bitcoin Internet 2.0. And he said if America wants to dominate Internet 2.0 or Bitcoin the way it does Internet 1.0, we need to get busy. We need to get started. And of course, you can't bomb your way into having Bitcoin supremacy. You can't bully other countries, right? So Bitcoin is unconfiscatable. It's very different. So in America's foreign policy, where they grab other countries' oil, they send in the Marines and they take your oil. They'll send in John Perkins, the economic hitman, and they'll load your economy up with debt, and then they'll force you to pay back the debt. And then they can't pay the debt, they'll take your assets. And it's all very intimidating, and they bully and they use guns. And Paul Krugman of the New York Times said the US dollar is backed by violence. Okay, with Bitcoin, it doesn't work. You can't, no one, it's unconfiscatable. The wealth Iran is accumulating right now is unconfiscatable, and they can do deals with any country in the world uncensored by any third party. No sanctions, nothing. The U.S. is now waking up to this, and they're saying, wait, we better get in here. And that's right. So the nation state is no longer relevant. Fiat money, or nation flag currency, as we call it, no longer relevant. The American experience from 1776 to 2020 was very exciting. Thank you very much, founding fathers, but it's been nice knowing you, and we'll put you in the history books, but that's no longer happening. And we're in a whole new post-nation state world, and with the world reserve currency, with Bitcoin and Bitcoin podcast, Bitcoin Nation, and it's unconfiscatable. It's everyone's individually sovereign. If you want my Bitcoin, show me something that is worth me giving you some Bitcoin for. If you can't have anything that's worth my Bitcoin, then shut the fuck up and tell your story walking, right? You can't take it from me. It's unconfiscatable.
Tell your story walking?
Tell your story walking. Tell your story walking. Like, just, tell your story while you're walking away. Like, shut the fuck up. Tell your story while you're walking away, right? As you're walking away from me, as you're talking to my hand, or walking away, mumble your story, whatever. It doesn't, just go away, just leave, tell your story walking, get out of here.
Right. And somebody mentioned Swan Bitcoin and that they're happy with it. SwanBitcoin.com/max is where you go. And you spell max, M-A-X, just for those who don't know. Of course, you have to be in the U.S., and they've got all sorts of new products there. You dollar cost average on an hourly, daily, weekly, monthly basis, and they have smash buys coming in.
They got this new thing. It's actually donate plasma and get Bitcoin. So you just put the needle right in the arm, and you donate the plasma, and it hooks you up with Bitcoin in real time. Blood for Bitcoin is called. It's a great new product over there at Swan Bitcoin.
Right. swanbitcoin.com/max. Go check it out because, it's a really good service and there are very few really OG sort of cool companies. Somebody did a great post where they were saying like, look at this amazing advisory board and staff at swanbitcoin.com. They were pretty impressed with it. And it was, really impressive. If you look at it,
Yeah, yeah. The Corey's put together a lot of great folks over there. Great team, and
yeah. So it's like
you
this
know,
Max Hillenbrand, Hillebrand.
yeah.
And he said, so Corey Clipson, Jan Pritzker, Brady Swenson, Gigi, Jorn Roeder, Jason Don Brecky von Bitcoin, Andrew Edstrom, Reed Womack, Brandon Quidham. We're going to be speaking to him on Orange Pill soon, actually.
Hmm.
Advisors, Lynn Alden, Max Kaiser, Preston Pish, Stefan Lavera, Robert Breedlove, Matt Odell. So it's an A+ team,
Yeah, yeah.
man.
It's a good team. Those are good people. I'm always checking in with all those folks. They're always thinking of new stuff, and it's all like, it's accretive. Bitcoin is accretive. All the value
Mm.
keeps improving every single day. All these things come together, and it creates new valuable stuff all the time. And it's all like the mystery of Bitcoin is yet to be discovered. There's so much of the path we have yet to explore. What it does when you have a global, unconfiscatable, immutable currency like Bitcoin, how it changes the world. I think right now what we're seeing is it favors peace over war. It favors trade over, dogma, or, it favors price discovery over state centralized price fixing. It just opens up a universe of possibility.
Right. I'm looking for. Oh, shit. This is why. It's downloading something in the background. And I don't need that. I don't need this to do that. um, the thing is that I wanted to find this thing from Obama because Obama is in the news pushing his book. And the thing that he said is basically that the internet is a threat to democracy, right? But of course, the internet upholds our republic, our rights under the Constitution, that as we were founded as a republic of free speech and trusting the people. Because remember, the people themselves are supposed to be rulers of this country, not the Obamas of the world. We elect them to lead us for 4 years or 8 years and do all the hard work.
Yeah.
And he's saying that under Biden, what they're going to start doing now is they need to meet with these tech executives and make sure to provide context around all sorts of people like Orange Pill because, don't end the Fed. There's no such thing as a Cantillon effect. There's no such thing as hard money, that the Fed takes care of you. The money printers take care of you. Like, this is the sort of context they want to provide. They don't want you to believe in fake news, they say, like Bitcoin or individual sovereignty or anything like that. They want to push MMT on you. They want to push this idea of debt forgiveness for those who, for some reason, they get 50,000 free money. If you happen to have gone to college, if you have any nephews or nieces or children who went to, did an apprenticeship instead, or went to work because they couldn't afford university, they get jack all.
Right. So, I was around when the internet was first starting in the mid 90s. And what was fantastic about it is that the content was incredible and it was all for free. And you had Napster, of course, where you were downloading music, all the music in the world for free. And copyright laws were thrown out the window. And it was this whole Cambrian period of creativity. And then we started to become corporatized. And then it started to become like the telephone companies owning the ISPs. And then it was all like HBO and it's a subscription. And now it's Spotify and you subscribe to the music and everything's a subscription. And so what Obama wants to do is he wants to create America, the subscription model. So everybody can subscribe to America like you would subscribe to Netflix or Spotify. You pay your monthly bill. It might cost $20,000 or $25,000 a year, and you get some basic services for that. And if you can't afford it, you get kind of deplatformed or memory hold. You never heard from again. And subscription can end at any second if you violate the terms and conditions. And of course, to terminate that subscription would be talking about something that does not directly impact and ingratiate people like Obama, who are running the subscription service, who, by the way, has a multi-picture deal at Netflix. So he was able to turn his 8 years in the White House into a film deal at Netflix. That's their vision of the Grand Reset. That's their vision of the New World Order. And, it goes against the idea of the public domain or the commons or a public wealth or a public good or the wide open spaces or the Grand Canyon or the national parks, or I've got my air to breathe. I've got my individual sovereignty. We've got individual freedom. Like, none of that stuff works in an America, the subscription model, right? All that stuff's thrown out the door. You can subscribe to a documentary about America, the way America was, and you can pay for a documentary about the founding fathers, and you can subscribe to that, and you can be entertained by it, but you cannot participate in the American experience anymore under the vision of Obama as Americanism as a subscription. No, that would be the same thing as plugging your television coaxial cable into your cerebral cortex and paying Obama a monthly fee to replay his speeches for eternity. And that, my friends, would be boring as sin.
Right. Well, they're going to hire all these think tankers, which they're already doing, right, over the past few years to determine what is truth. Now, do you really think some schmuck in DC who's like a smug person who feels superior to every single one of these people leaving comments here knows any more than Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle combined? Like, they couldn't figure out truth. They didn't know what truth was. They tried to determine the nature of truth, and they're like these thought about it a lot of what is truth. And here, some think tanker, friend of Rachel Maddow is going to tell you what is truth and what is not truth. So this is the human experience, right? The human experience is about finding truth.
Look, Obama and Rachel Maddow are debt collectors. And the debts that they want to collect on are the debts that they imposed on you against your will. Just like America does with foreign countries all over the world. They say, hey, Venezuela, you owe us $1 billion. You never borrowed it. And there was never any contract, but we decided you owe us $1 billion or $10 billion or $100 billion. And you better start paying or we send in the bombers. So Obama's like, hey, guess what, Americans? I'm your debt collector. And you never asked for the debt. We never wrote a contract and nothing of it exists, but you have to pay it. And if you don't pay it, we're going to cut you off from the grid. And then you'll be out there alone, hungry, starving, without anyone to talk to. And we don't care. Just give us your money. So, if you like having your life run by debt collectors, then go down that path. If you want to escape the debt collectors, you want to escape the Obamas and the Rachel Maddows and the reprobates and the has-beens and the washed up, you get yourself some Bitcoin and become individually sovereign. Don't allow yourself to be compromised by these the sous chef of the devil.
Exactly. So, I mean, obviously Obama went to Harvard and Columbia before that. And, he and Rachel Maddow is a Rhodes Scholar, and they just think that they're smarter and better than you. And they genuinely believe in this deplorables thing. And they think that shutting you off from all knowledge, basically we're back to pre-enlightenment, right? They want to, just like when we've told you, when Dennis Diderot wrote the encyclopedia, it caused riots in the French Senate because the French senators were the elite. They went to the elite colleges, they went to the elite universities, they spoke Latin, they knew how to this knowledge was for them. The horrible, despicable deplorables, like they shouldn't have access to knowledge. It genuinely caused riots. Diderot became very isolated. He was marginalized. Everybody, all his like elite friends wanted nothing to do with him because they got in so much trouble. So the same thing. This is like Obama is one of those rioting French senators in the mid 1700s rejecting the notion that the ordinary person should have any free access to knowledge.
Right. His words are villainous, and I guess he's looking for some kind of confrontation. I guess. I mean, these folks are trying to stir the pot, and I think against that we've got a global movement going on with Bitcoin. I don't see how they're going to triumph over a billion people who are individually sovereign who can opt out of fiat money and opt out of a nation state. I don't see how they're going to win that fight, but I think that their inculcation as supremacists in various fields leaves them vulnerable in many ways. They've got a blind spot. It's called hubris. And we know from history that this is fatal.
They're smuggists rather than supremacists. They're smuggists. And it's a battle eternal. This has been going on. This went on during pre-Renaissance. It went on during the Enlightenment. The elite wanted to control knowledge. That's always what they want to control, and they don't want the ordinary person to have access to the knowledge and come up with their own fancy ideas, right? So they don't trust you to be able to read. They're always telling you to keep in your lane, to trust the elite, to trust the institutions, to trust them to tell you what is right or what is wrong. And even with the encyclopedia, for example, Diderot himself, because he increasingly had to keep on learning new things in order to write sections on, say, like a carburetor on a car. Like he would obviously, I don't think there were carburetors back in the 1700s, but because like all these people were dropping out, all these experts and knowledgeable people on certain topics that he would hire, like everybody was getting afraid because the Senate was so angry. So he would have to like learn what a carburetor was. And so he would like spend weeks and weeks trying to figure out what it is so he could write that section in the encyclopedia. Again, like that kind of fits with that whole polymath sort of notion of the Renaissance man, is like, the human brain, the human quest and thirst for knowledge is magnificent and huge. And, when we first started doing Kaiser Report, and before that, the Oracle together and stuff, like people would always say to me, because Max had been a banker, Stacy, shut the fuck up. You weren't a banker. You can't talk about bankers, therefore. You can't talk about Wall Street. And you're like, no, sit on this, buddy. Because like, I'm a human with curiosity. That's all it takes, right? Like, do you think Jamie Dimon's any smarter than I am? No fucking way. That guy's sitting there today, interviewed yet again, saying he doesn't believe in Bitcoin.
Right. Well, because you have a familiarity with first principles, and first principles apply to all disciplines. And if you have a good knowledge of the first principles, the guiding philosophies of all things, then you have an inkling of how all things interact with each other. And that's all you need to begin a conversation. But the thing about the encyclopedia, of course, is that it took all of that knowledge that was being monopolized by the priesthood, and they made it accessible at a very, very cheap price, right? It was the cheapness of a book versus the Vatican, right? The Vatican, very expensive to run, all those cardinals around the world, priests, nuns, churches. That's an enormously expensive organization and network to run. Well, if you could take all of the knowledge known on planet Earth and put it into some books, and you could buy it for a few hundred, francs or whatever the cost might be, right? You've just collapsed the price of that to the pinhead. And same thing with Bitcoin. Bitcoin takes everything we've ever known about money and makes it immediately accessible to anybody who can then put it into an unconfiscatable wallet and have value accreting for the rest of eternity. So they've disintermediated all the banks, disintermediated all the central banks, disintermediated every school of economics that's ever existed up until Bitcoin. And it's now within everyone's possession to have that eternal knowledge. And so that's what they're fighting against. And they're not really aware yet that the battle is lost. So it's comical to see people like Obama come to the table and start yapping about this and that. But he's already lost before he started, because he doesn't realize the quantum shift that's happened in the last 10 years with Bitcoin. And so it's comical. It's just comical. I think you have to. It's absurdism. I studied a lot of absurdist theater, Pirandello, for example, and that was a movement in theater for a while, European theater, which is quite interesting to observe and to create a theatrical experience out of the absurdism of failed characters. And Obama is a failed character who's running smack dab into a brick wall with 20th century or 19th century ideas that are just not going to work.
Well, I just hope, because there is like this um, section of Bitcoin that just goes insane whenever anybody famous, powerful, or wealthy gets involved with Bitcoin. So I hope, like, when Obama does come to Bitcoin, and he will, like, I hope people aren't like, oh my God, Obama, we love you, like, because that's what they're going to do. And he's going to act like he figured it out. He's the one that figured it out. When it was you, the people that he wants to shut down from the internet, he doesn't want you to roam freely around the internet. And that's why we're building, the Orange Pill Podcast Telegram group, is because it's run by a Russian dude out of Dubai, and he stands up and fights for.
Oh, you're talking about Telegram, the platform.
I saw a warning. Yeah, I saw a warning. That yellow bar popped up saying some error in YouTube, but I see us still here. So you never know.
The costs collapse, and that has a huge impact on the economics of things. Similarly, during the 1960s and the movement for civil rights, it was driven in large part by the record, right? So music and rock and roll was cut on really, really cheap vinyl, and then it was played on the radio, and you could hear it for free. And so again, all of the cultural machinations, all the cultural infrastructure was disintermediated. The folks that were the gatekeepers of culture they did an end run around culture. All the segregation, certainly in America, was just cut down and destroyed by rock and roll and musical, the whole musical phenomenon of that time, and vinyl records, free radio. And that's technology. So the vinyl record was the Diderot's encyclopedia or Gutenberg press of its time. The internet during the 1990s was another huge leap away from centralization, and now they're trying to rein that in. But Bitcoin is now taking on the ultimate of the ultimate. It's decentralizing money, and it's doing so in a way that is species defining. The human species walked out of Africa. The Homo sapiens walked out of Africa. Let's say 200,000 years ago, I believe, roughly. Not in 200,000 years since Homo sapiens walked out of Africa have we had an event like Bitcoin that fundamentally changes how Homo sapiens interact with each other in a way that's so remarkably positive. And as Paul Tudor Jones says, Bitcoin is pro-humanity. I mean, that's a freaking hedge fund who figured it out after looking at it for 6 months. Whereas Obama, right, 3 or 4 years from now, he'll still have his thumb up his ass trying to find out, like, he'll be like Peter Schiff. I lost the password to my key. There's no hope for this guy.
Well, I mean, he's a guy who hired Larry Summers. The very first thing he did upon being elected, before, his transition team. So, I mean, that tells you all you need to know. And there are a group of people that believe in the supremacy of the elite. And again, it was there in the Renaissance. It was there at the Enlightenment. Those things, they weren't able to stop the Enlightenment. They weren't able to stop the Renaissance. So, I mean, that's the positive thing about it, is like, I kind of ate an ice cube and my mouth is frozen.
I did that once at the Playboy Club in Manhattan. I was auditioning to do stand-up comedy, and I was waiting in the wings, and I was chewing some ice because I was nervous. And by the time my time was to get on stage and audition, my mouth was frozen, and I could not say a single thing. And you can't thaw your mouth out, So by 5 minutes later, the time is up. Thank you for your audition. Goodbye. And I'm like, whoa.
So, who is it? Like our Orange Pill podcast Telegram group is still talking about and very alarmed that like they feel like it has special meaning that Max Kaiser was in the Telegram group at 4:30 in the morning, and what is the meaning of this?
Really?
Yeah. And they're asking, like, I went in there at like 5:30, and I got woken up by the fox or the coyotes, whatever it was, barking outside. Or else it was you. Who knows? Like, it could be Max
Outside?
crawling around outside.
Oh, a werewolf.
Yeah. So, I mean, something was making weird noises outside.
Right, right.
And but they're like assigning some sort of mythical or mythological or conspiracy theory to this, like that there was something important.
Well, the thing is, sometimes you get up to pee, don't you?
Yeah,
So,
somebody said Max had a pee and has a
right.
Discord
So
addiction.
I'm like, oh, I'm gonna pee, right? And I'm like, you know what? I know right now at 4:30 in the morning, these people in Australia are up and around. And so I said, I'm going to tweet this out and say, hey, Australia, join our Telegram group. And yeah, I got some Australians into the group. That's the whole story.
And like I said, like I have a real like as Max says, I wouldn't say it myself, but I'm like a Warren Buffett of Bitcoin. And so I like discounts. I like lower prices. And when prices are zooming like that, I don't like it because I like to stack every day. And I'm like, God damn it, I'm only going to get half what I got the day before. And that sucks. So, when I was going to bed, it was like through 17,000, through 18,000. I was like, God damn it. And I told the group, I was like, what is it going to be when I wake up? And people were like 20, 21,000. I was like, oh, that sucks. And so when I heard the animals like making noises, I couldn't go back to sleep. Like usually you wake up, you go pee or something and then you just go back to sleep. But that I was like, I wonder what, is it 21,000? Is it like, what is it doing? What is it doing? And so I couldn't go back to sleep.
Well, in
Was that a good story?
2017, it's like it made a move from basically 1,000 to 20,000. And, that was, you're not sleeping really because it's like, you can't believe what's happening. And the whole market was manic to a degree, very rare. I remember in the .com
Yeah.
peak or the 1987 stock market peak, that was that level of mania and craziness. And think about all that crazy shit that was going on. I mean, so it was like a 24-hour carnival circus going on until it, crashed.
Yeah. So Max has been around for many booms and busts.
Yes.
So that's why, like, so has of course Paul Tudor Jones, who was also on the news. Max is on Dan Rather's on CBS during the 1987 crash. But Paul Tudor Jones became very famous then because he had shorted the market on the Friday before, right? Or Thursday before. So he thought it was going to crash and he made a big fortune uh, because he predicted it.
Yep.
But
yeah. Mm-hmm. A few people were short, and they made a big killing. Paul Tudor Jones being one of them. Yeah, I was reading. I think he put together 4 years in his career, 4 straight years of 100% gains. I don't know which years those were exactly, but I mean, obviously, that's pretty remarkable performance. And when he got into Bitcoin, I said this was the starting gun for a whole new era. And sure enough, now we've got Stan Druckenmiller and a lot of other folks that are piling in.
Ray Dalio
Ray
started to say
Dalio.
maybe he's missed something.
Right, he's starting to the stir. He's starting because his performance is down, and he needs something to fix it, and he's looking pretty bad. So he's agile enough to know when maybe he's wrong and needs to make a course correction. Whereas people like Peter Schiff seemingly is incapable of, the old saying, if you're in a hole, stop digging. There's Peter Schiff, he's digging through the center of the earth. He won't stop digging. He's just doubling down every single month on his wrong opinions. And again, it's comical.
Well, because so the layer of like banks, brokers, private equity, hedge funds, like they have to perform every day, right? Their clients are the clients that Ray Dalio has are going to be very similar to the clients that would go into with invest with Paul Tudor Jones or Stan Druckenmiller. And Stan Druckenmiller and Paul Tudor Jones and Ray Dalio all have they share in common a huge position against the US dollar with a massive position in gold. And so Ray Dalio's clients and his hedge fund was the biggest in the world. I don't know if it still is, but Bridgewater Associates is the biggest in the world. And, his clients who are giving him 20, 30, 40, 50, $100 million, they're saying, hey, we know this guy, Stan Druckenmiller and Paul Tudor Jones are massive hedge funds as well. They have gold like you do, but they're saying Bitcoin is the fastest horse in the race. Why don't you have any exposure to Bitcoin? And why are you out there saying it's dumb? And they're saying that it's a bet on humanity. So
and their numbers are going up.
Yeah. So he's got to answer to that. That's the sort of pressure he's facing. Like Peter Schiff doesn't face any pressure, right? He's got some clients in gold or whatever, but
he's more of a broker dealer. So he's like a broker, and he's not. He provides a service. Nobody puts their money with Schiff to manage. Yeah. He's had a couple of funds which have done poorly, but he's not like Ray Dalio or Paul Tudor Jones where they're gunslinging hedge funds, and every single quarter a lot of money flows in, flows out. And so Ray Dalio's got to look at the competition and say, I'm going to lose clients. I'm going to go out of business unless I adjust my thinking. And that's where he is at the moment.
So you shouldn't never fall in love with one of your positions, right?
Well, he himself, Ray Dalio, has a line in his book, never fall in love with a hot dog, which people make fun of because it sounds crazy. But that's what he's saying is, the hot dog, being like a showboat, as I understand it, or somebody, don't fall in love with the latest, greatest thing. But even his analysis of Bitcoin thus far is so far off the mark. It sounds like somebody who just discovered it in 2014 or 2015. He's obviously not done the work. He's not done the research, which is, I think, his clients it would be worrying because you're listening to a guy who's managing your money talk about something, and even now the general public has more information and understanding of Bitcoin than the guy who's managing your money. So that's got to be worrying for a lot of clients. So I'd say, he reminds me, I think he might be in a position where Bill Gross was over there at PIMCO. Remember, PIMCO was the largest bond fund in the world. Bill Gross was considered a genius in the bond market.
The bond king.
The bond king. And then within 2 or 3 months, he totally lost it. He went through this hellacious divorce where he was accused of doing incredible vandalism to his home for his ex-wife. He's playing loud music to spook his neighbors, like having a psychotic break. And that's what happens when suddenly everything goes against you. I would hate that to happen to Ray Dalio, but he may go full Bill Gross at this point.
Oh my God. Right. Well, so, I mean, those are the guys getting in now, and they'll, hedge funds don't fall in love with their positions, right? They can't afford to. That's how they stay hedge funds. Maybe somebody like Warren Buffett can because he's a long-term investor, but these guys are just like in and out, right? So if it's not working, it's not working. But, you have to remember that everybody talks about these guys, and they talk about Ricardo Salinas Pliego now. And by the way, he said the other 90% of his portfolio is in precious metals miners. But you have to remember that the earliest in this whole space, the big swinging dicks in this space, were actually still Abby Johnson and the woman from ARK Investment. Why can't I remember her name? It's my Margarita. I can't remember her name, but they were way early. Abby was in back in 2014. So, and Fidelity Bank is private, so it's not publicly listed. So you have no idea how much Bitcoin they have, but I reckon it's actually quite a bit more than what MicroStrategy holds because they've been mining Bitcoin the whole time since 2014. And they don't sell it. So they're mining Bitcoin. They've got a huge position. And so there are like a lot of these huge whales that were took, you know, when it was a riskier bet to take. So she took that move for Fidelity at a very risky time. And I just want to celebrate that there are there you know Stan Druckenmiller and Paul Tudor Jones moving in is a good thing, and it makes sense that they would only move in at this point because because of the way the price is higher, and that is kind of needed for big investors like this because of the liquidity and size of the market. But the way Fidelity came in was really quite interesting, and like the maneuver was very strategic and quiet, and built a huge position very early.
Yeah, absolutely. He's a hero in the space for sure. Not talked about that often. I guess because it is a private company, so we don't really know what the numbers are, and so that's just hasn't been on the radar. But Abby Johnson did take a huge position at Fidelity, still very active in the space. Bill Miller at Legg Mason, also very early into Bitcoin.
Yeah, yeah.
3 years or so now he's been into it, and his pitch is very simple. The demand is greater than the supply. That at the end of the day, that's really the only thing you have to keep in mind. You've got Barry Silbert over there at Digital Currency Group, and they are buying. Last week they had a day when they bought $100 million in one day of Bitcoin. He's now got over 10 billion under management at Digital Currency Group, and that's growing exponentially, it seems. So that looks like it's and then Cash App just reported a humongous numbers. MicroStrategy stock just hit a new all-time high. I think it's even higher. Well, not going back to the 1990s, but it hit a new 5-year high. I'll say that the stock hit a new 5-year high of 220 or 222. That's up from 185 in just 2 or 3 months, and
I bought some of them.
and yeah, I think you're up already 10 or 15%, and that's based entirely on the Bitcoin play. So,
Mm.
other companies, other shareholders are having that conversation with the board. I mean, every quarter, like, how come we don't have Bitcoin? How come our stock's not going up like MicroStrategy? How come you guys don't, have the balls to go out there and convert a lot of this cash on your portfolio to Bitcoin? Why are you buying back so much stock? That's a waste. You're going to end up like IBM, where they bought 130 billion worth of stock and the company's now worth 110 billion. That's the fate of all these companies that are buying back their own stock.
Right. That leads me to two questions. I have a question about that, but first, because you mentioned Bill Miller went long Bitcoin about 3 years ago. So, from your experience as a broker, like, why do you think that is with between Bill Miller and then Abby Johnson from Fidelity being so early? They're Boston based, and what's that Boston versus New York versus Chicago? Those are the three financial centers. Like, what's the difference between them? Why might Bill Miller and Abby Johnson have been so much earlier than the rest of the financial sector? And then Warren Buffett, like, this guy is insane. Like, what's going on this year between the whole dumping all his airline stocks at the very bottom, not even waiting like for an obvious V-shaped sort of recovery that would happen, even buying more like $1 billion worth right after the initial lockdowns, and then selling them. And then he bought gold. He went long Barrick this summer and then sold that out of that position, and then dumped the rest of his banking shares. And he's just buying back Berkshire Hathaway.
And he went big into pharmaceuticals on the COVID vaccine.
Yeah, after it already had soared.
Right, after they already popped.
Yeah,
so he's acting like a Robinhood trader.
Yeah, like, he's full of doubt, right? He should just retire now.
Right, he's gone loco.
He's lost his nerve. But what about that Boston thing? How does Boston in the financial industry differ from New York City?
Right. So Chicago is definitely commodities,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, and that whole Midwest corridor, that's where Paul Tudor Jones comes from there. He's a commodities trader and an agricultural trader in Kansas City. They have a Kansas City Board of Trade. That's where he kind of learned his craft. And then in the 1980s, introduction of financial futures, which were traded also in Chicago. And so you had a lot of the commodities traders start trading financials. But it's very much a futures trading environment and culture. And the Chicago Board of Options are there, and the commodities trading exchanges are there. In New York, it is all about big money. So big in New York has the capital. New York is rich. New York has the big banks. New York has the New York Fed, which is right next to Wall Street. And it's about size. It's about buying, big chunks of stock and for control and power. And Gotham City is, the powerful jeweled city of the universe. And then Boston is really about analysts and fund managers, really, and probably most personified by Peter Lynch at Fidelity, who ran Magellan Fund, I think, for 30 years. Is averaging something close to in the high 20 percentile, which is a remarkable performance. He kind of retired at the top of his game. But so fund managers and stock pickers at these funds like Fidelity and these other funds are all in Boston. And they grew up in Boston probably because of the education in Boston with Harvard and other fine universities that are in Cambridge and Boston. And so it's a very heavily fund manager and analyst driven environment. And so they're not big capital and it's not trading. It's about analysis, analyzing, uh, picking stocks. So therefore, when something
Mm.
like Bitcoin appears on the scene, you've got all these analysts that are going to start digging into it and tearing into it. And bringing their PhD brains and their analytical brains to Bitcoin, and then they were the first to appear, to see it. Chicago wouldn't really see it until there's something to trade. So now those derivatives just recently happened. And as you point out, New York is a big money center. So until it reached a certain capitalization, in this case, $300 billion, then, okay, New York fund managers and hedge fund guys who are in Connecticut as well, who managing half a trillion or $1 trillion, or in the case of BlackRock, $7 trillion, right? Then it's on their radar as, being part of a bigger cap phenomenon that they're gonna participate in it that way. So I would say that's Boston's place in the financial universe.
So if they're known for being analysts, obviously they would be studying this before Wall Street is hearing about it, because Wall Street does what's on Wall Street's radar is price, is the size of the entity.
Wall Street's about mergers, acquisitions, IPOs, right? They're not necessarily big on analytical, chops as you would find in the fund industry in Boston. They don't have the capital there, but they have their stock pickers. So when you say, here, read the white paper on this thing,
Mm.
Bitcoin. And so they're taking their entire experience of picking through balance sheets and income statements and analyzing, that's what they do. And they once you go into the rabbit hole, as everybody knows, it's a wonderful voyage, and it just starts to make a lot of sense. So Abby at Fidelity comes out of that culture. And so once she started digging into it, she's like, oh, wow, I can see how this could get to, her analytical mind kicks in. And so I think that's why, that she went down that path before anybody else. Same thing with Bill Miller, I guess, with his fund. That's, I think, I'm not sure where they're headquartered, but I'm sure they have at Legg Mason. I'm sure they have a big presence there. But all these State Street Bank is there. They do all the clearing
Mm.
for all these funds. As a broker on Wall Street, if you sell funds, most of them are headquartered in that area. Baltimore is a big fund place.
Mm.
Of course, Alex Brown and Sons, one of the first investment banks in America, was in Baltimore. I worked at Alex Brown for a while. And, so that's probably why.
Right. Well, that's interesting. I would love one day to be able to interview Abby Johnson, but she doesn't do any media. So it's it's just a different style. Like Jamie Dimon, he won't shut the fuck up, right? He's on the news all the time. Like he's on CNBC every day talking about Bitcoin,
Well,
how
he's
much he.
lobbying for a place in the administration, right? He wants to be Fed chair or Treasury secretary at some point.
Yeah.
So he's trying to get his political speech writing abilities up. He rightfully sees Bitcoin as a threat to
Mm.
his business and his worldview.
Sure, that's why he has to keep on saying, like, when asked, Like it's almost always unprovoked that he mentions Bitcoin, but every financial journalist asks him what he thinks about Bitcoin.
Right.
And he's like, no, because he can't say, like, if he wants to be the Fed chair or the Treasury Secretary, he can't say anything about Bitcoin.
He can't say he's wrong. Because if you want to have a position like that, you have to have a track record of always being right, right? America doesn't accept anybody admitting they're wrong. You have to be right all the time and righteous, right? So you never say you're wrong. You just say, well, I'm going to just double down on my statement. I run a huge bank and I want that job as Fed chair or Treasury Secretary. So I'm not going to mention the fact that I got this completely wrong. And I'm not going to have to apologize for being completely wrong. And I don't want anybody to think that at any moment I was ever wrong about anything, even though that's what I was, because I'm trying to get this job.
Right. I can't imagine Jamie Dimon going to the Fed, though, because they seem to mostly, I guess Jerome Powell was a private equity guy, right? But it's mostly seems to be academics, right, that they bring in there. Ben Bernanke.
But it has become like the White House. It's become a theater. It's become a media outlet. And they do the press conference now. Jay Powell does a press conference all the time.
Yeah.
And they're saying their opinions are quoted every single day. Right. So, I mean, that's, if you're an egomaniac like Jamie Dimon, you'd want to have a press conference every day about what you think about the nation's money supply. I mean, it's very satisfying to an egomaniac for this. So that's why it would be appealing to him. Or any one of those high profile jobs would work for somebody like that.
So Jack Lindsay asks Stacy, will gold ever move again? I really hope so. But remember, I mean, we've spent half of this episode talking about Stan Druckenmiller and Paul Tudor Jones going long Bitcoin, saying it's the fastest horse in the race. But remember, they both have way bigger positions in gold than they do in Bitcoin. The same with Ricardo Salinas Pliego, much bigger position in gold and silver. So, the majority of their position is held there, and they're looking for some alpha with that bit in Bitcoin, right? So, I mean, the same underlying thesis is the same, right? It's a bet against the dollar, and it's a bet against financialization, globalization led by the U.S., the banking system, essentially. So they're betting against those things, and it's the same thing. But gold, as you've always pointed out, is a $9 trillion market versus $300 billion for Bitcoin at the moment. So obviously.
Look, people forget that in the year 2020, gold made new all-time highs against every currency in the world, including the U.S. dollar.
It's up 25% this year.
Right. It's beaten the S&P 500 for 20 years, cumulatively. It's outperformed
Warren Buffett.
It's outperformed Warren Buffett. So if the Bitcoin didn't exist, you'd be saying, I'm happy with my gold because it has performed well. But with Bitcoin in the world, it looks like it's standing still and doing nothing. But that's not the case. It is actually not doing a bad thing. It is making new highs, making new all-time highs. That's the thing. It just, compared to Bitcoin, it doesn't look like it's doing anything, but in fact, it's doing about what you'd expect. It's doing exactly the reason you bought gold is it's doing exactly what you thought it would do. It's doing it.
People mentioned it was Kathy Wood. I have to forget. I don't want to forget to say, from ARK Investment. And she's done an amazing job. I had a position. I think I sold it perhaps too early in ARK. She made the early bet on Bitcoin. She, put GBTC in there. Tesla, way early. She got in at $20 into that. So she made a lot of really, really smart bets very early on.
Yeah, she's got a hot hand. Now, where is she based? Where is ARK based?
Good question.
I wouldn't be surprised if, it would either be based in Silicon Valley or Boston, right? Probably Silicon Valley, because that's obviously the tech hub. And that's probably where she's based, in San Francisco. The Bay Area, I'm pretty sure. That would be my guess. I see Airbnb is going public. They just released their financials pre-going public. The symbol will be ABNB on the NASDAQ. And so folks are looking at that with great anticipation. Obviously, COVID has dropped their top line revenue, I think, down by 40% over year. But they managed to squeak out a profitable quarter last quarter. I'm just working from looking at a tweet like 6 hours ago. I don't quote me on these numbers, but that is still managing to do an initial public offering. So the capital markets are still functioning at that level.
Well, ARK Investment Management is in New York City, and they manage $6.6 billion as of January 2019. I believe, Barry Silbert's outfit just passed a billion, right?
10 billion.
10 billion. Oh, right. But this is interesting because this is only from today. Kathy Wood might lose control of ARK, the company she founded. She still owns 50 to 75% of the company. It's a privately held asset manager founded just 6 years ago. Um, but the firm's success hasn't only been spotted by many investors, but also by one of its early backers and minority shareholders. A recent regulatory filing suggests that Resolute Investment Managers, ARK Fund's U.S. distributor, plans to take control of the company early next year. It turns out that when Resolute acquired a minority stake in ARK in 2016, the deal also included an option that allows Resolute to purchase a controlling stake if it wants before the option expires in early 2021. ARK, which manages $30 billion in assets, including $15 billion across 7 exchange-traded funds, has more than tripled its assets in the past year alone. Now Resolute is exercising its option to own a bigger piece of the cake.
Right. She should fire her lawyers immediately for not spotting that. And, this happens all the time. People get into these agreements without reading the fine print and not understanding that some of these minority stakeholders, what rights they do have. And this is a common occurrence, and it's a very tricky world out there. You really got to watch your back.
Shit. So that sucks. That's just out and Barron's. I was just like,
Yeah,
that sucks. I mean, she's one of the amazing investors.
right. I'm sure the clause in the agreement is ambiguous, but and that's probably why she didn't see it. But if you have enough lawyers and enough money, you can disrupt things and make things difficult. And she could be squeezed out, forced out, and which is sad. She'll start a new fund, obviously, and it'll have pretty well capitalized, unless there's also something in that agreement that would preclude her as a non-compete basis from competing in the business for a year or 2 years. That would be even more damaging potentially. They could engage in some kind of settlement, but I think she's got to be really disappointed with that. Even though the buyout, obviously, she's going to make huge bucks. So there's that. I mean, she's going to make a lot of money, but I think probably she didn't see this coming, and this has got to be a big disappointment, is my guess.
That's the word she uses. Her statement to the press is that she said she is disappointed with Resolute's unwelcome notice of its intention to seize control of the business.
Right. So a lot of people think that if I do a really good job, then these people are not going to do something stupid like squeeze me out because it's against their self-interest. But you never underestimate the greed and stupidity of people. Never.
Look at Roger Ver. Right?
I mean, look at Roger Ver. Here's a guy who was king of the space for the first couple of years and then decided to blow his brains out on Bitcoin Cash and Jihan and all that horrible mess that was now his legacy. It's sad.
Well, I think that's a good. We've been going for a while. I don't see the time here, but it's flown by. There's Inner Dinosaur. He always comes with the same thing. Hello, Stacy. Hello, Max. Peace sign. A dinosaur.
Oh.
And 100.
Wow. Okay, Dinosaur 100.
Every single episode of Orange Pill Podcast,
Peace
he leaves
sign,
the same message.
Dinosaur 100.
So, yeah, that's a pretty... I need to research the story about Kathy Wood, so...
Well, she's a huge Tesla bull, as you pointed out. She's the most bullish. She's the X. In Wall Street, if you're the number one analyst in any stock, you're the X in that name. So everyone, like, they'll say, name any stock, and they'll say, oh, Joey Bag of Donuts at Morgan Stanley is the X on that name. It's like everyone follows that analyst. They've kind of cornered the market. They've got the best access.
Mm,
And so I think
mm.
pretty much she's the X on Tesla, and she's got a good relationship with the company. She gets good information, and she has a good vision for it's going. Elon Musk will probably hire her
Good. I hope
as
so.
like in-house mergers and acquisitions department or a startup or something. Like, bring Kathy Woods inside. He's capitalized now. He's able to sell a lot of stock. He's got, how much cash does he have? I think he's got to 40 billion or so in cash. Again, just working from memory
He
here.
just increased his net worth by 15% this past week, as it's they're about to get listed up into the.
Yeah, they're included now in the S&P. So the stock is zoomed much higher. So he's got money to burn, believe it or not. And so, yeah, he could take her in-house. That would be something I would not be surprised to see. He could make her head of mergers and acquisitions, and they could go on an acquisition spree and just start buying battery startup companies, logistics companies. He's moving into some post battery world. Like, there's a new architecture for battery that does not use rare earths.
Hmm.
So that's supposed to be a new generation of batteries. So of course you could buy out some independent of the companies and that do a whole M&A thing. Tesla's is a monster stock. It's hard to believe what it does, but it does what it does, and it'll probably keep doing what it's doing.
And I'll just end on this comment from Matt Bradley, because I like it. One day I will drink Amarula with Max and Stacy on the moon or Mars. I
That's
like that.
true. That's true.
I like it. I want to go to Mars or the moon. Like, I never wanted to go before because, I don't even like flying. Like, but we fly all the time. And then I realized, like, the fact that I fly all the time, even though, like, I don't like turbulence and stuff, like, I'll probably be able to get over my fear of getting in a rocket ship and going to the moon.
I think so. I think the moon would be fun. I mean, it only takes a couple of days to get there, right?
Yeah.
7 days maybe. How long did it take
No,
Apollo 11 to get to the
it,
moon?
it took them 5 days.
5 days. Okay.
But I think we could go a little bit faster now, and I definitely would never go in that little tin can contraption. Like, they were
No,
insane. They
yeah,
were insane to go in that. That's a good documentary to watch. That Apollo 11
the new one.
documentary.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the one that just came out with all the footage that they just had originally seen, now seen for the first time.
because you look at that footage and, like, it looks like a death trap, right? Right.
The lunar module.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it could get off the ground or fly or anything, right?
And they're, like, so calm the whole time. It's never been done before. They're going out there.
Right.
And it's not until they come back that you even see they all have, like, little kids and wives, and they're
Yeah.
just like, dudes, like, there was a huge chance that you were never going to come back, and, like, you still went out there in this, like, like, it looks like a high school science experiment, right?
Yeah. Have you ever read the Nixon speech that was prepared if they died on the moon?
No.
Yeah, it was. It's a famous speech that he never had to use, obviously, but it's poetic, and he talks about, tells the nation essentially that our intrepid voyagers have passed away on the surface of the moon, etc. But they were prepared for that. The that documentary in the most intense part is when like the 90 seconds leading up to actually landing the lunar module on the surface of the moon. So they missed the target apparently, by a bit. And so the pilot of the lunar module, is in touch with Houston. And suddenly, there's a barrage of a cacophony of voices in his head, like all the speed and the height. And also they had like less than a thimble of gas,
Gasoline, yeah,
whatever's
petrol,
running that thing. I don't
jet
know what
fuel.
jet was it running. Is it jet fuel? Okay, so they were about to run out. So I mean, think about that. So you've trained your whole life. You're within 50 feet of the lunar surface. Mankind is about to land on the moon.
Mm.
You've missed a target. You're hovering. You're trying to find, if you got to find the right place to put this thing down. You're with two other guys. You're the pilot, and you've got this barrage of 100 different people like screaming all this shit in your ear, and you managed to land it. So that was so intense. I can't
Well,
imagine.
aren't all those guys, aren't they test pilots first?
Yeah, astronauts. Yeah, they're test pilots. Yeah, well,
Yeah.
that was the thing about that movie, The Right Stuff.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Chuck Yeager was a test pilot,
I mean,
and
that's a psychopathic job. Like, you have to have nerves of steel to do that shit.
yeah, well, they're like Air Force pilots and Navy pilots who are landing jets on aircraft carriers. That's no simple thing to do.
When
It,
you listen, remember Sully, the
yeah.
captain from
Mm.
American Airlines, who was the Air Force, former Air Force, and like all the air traffic controls, like, we have a runway at JFK. Negative. I'm going to land in the Hudson. We have a runway at Newark. How can you land at Newark? Negative. We're
Negative.
going down in the Hudson. Like, and
Negative.
he's so calm. It's just like, okay, no.
Yeah.
It was like, dude, like, it sounds like you're saying the Hudson.
It's so cool, though. Yeah, that's right. So The Right Stuff, it's the whole story about the jet, the fighter, the test pilots looking down on the astronauts. The astronauts are seen to be spam in a can, was the line used by one of them, maybe Chuck Yeager, that it was not really the glamour of being a test pilot to be in this astronaut thing. And that movie, it's a very fine movie, of course, based on the Tom Wolfe novel of the same name. A very fine writer, Tom Wolfe, one of America's best post-war writers in the new school of writing, the new journalism, with Hunter S. Thompson and Norman Mailer and Tom Wolfe, who brought in a realism to the prose, if you will.
And they're kind of like personalized.
Yeah.
Into the whole,
right. They're immersive into the.
Like, I was hungover and I went to see Nixon, and like, you're like, okay, did you have to add that information?
Truman Capote.
In
Cold Blood. He's actually in the jailhouse. The first person narrative, like it's like journalism slash, but prose, right? So, we don't have anything like that anymore.
You know who in the precious metals and Bitcoin space is David Morgan. He was a test pilot.
Oh, that's right.
I forget, but I mean, it's all kind of secretive, right? Like, they can't give too much information out, but he was
because they're flying military hardware that is protected under Secret Act and stuff. But you know who else? Going back now to 16, 17 years ago when we used to follow Bob Moriarty at 321 Gold. He was a pilot, Navy pilot.
No.
Army
Marine
pilot, Marine pilot,
in combat pilot in Vietnam, and still to this day he's done more combat hours than any Marine pilot in Marine history.
Right, he holds that record. And there's a great video of him flying underneath the Eiffel Tower in Paris before all the craziness started with the hijackings going on in the airspace, and that's online. You can see
he was prevented from coming into France for 10 years after that.
Yeah, he's got an incredible Vietnam story for sure. Bob Moriarty, he's a character. He hates Bitcoin. I pitched him on Bitcoin in 2011, and he just hated it from day one. Still hates it.
But there are certain people, like, okay, if you were that sort of test pilot and did that sort of crazy, insane shit, like, there's a level of people who are fudsters or hate Bitcoin or whatever that you're like, you tolerate it because you're like, well, you did some amazing stuff. Like, that whole life you had of being like the #1 combat pilot in the Marines.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. Like, it's pretty interesting. Right. So you there are grades of things of people who did nothing and just bash Bitcoin, like Jamie Dimon.
Yeah.
Or there's like people who are, these decorated pilots.
Yeah. I mean, think about it. Like when we heard about Bitcoin, I was 51 years old, which is pretty old for taking on something like this? Because I notice now, I mean, everyone's in their 20s and 30s on all these podcasts and all this content and everything like that. You know, I go on a podcast and it's 20-year-olds, 25-year-olds, and it's just like completely, complete. There's two generations removed from me, right? It's like completely different century.
Yeah, but those life experiences, that's why we became friends with Ricardo Salinas Pliego. It's because of his father, who's like 94, 95 years old. But his father has like amazing stories, and he's like a great storyteller, has read every single book
Mm.
on earth. Like, he's also like somebody like, oh, yeah, 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 Hayek. Well, he and I used to have dinner, and like every person you talk about, Rothbard, Mises,
He might be the most educated person I've ever met. Him
yeah,
and Michael Hudson, is
yeah.
probably extremely educated. But Hugo Price is he's completely the most educated person in
Like, you
terms of.
feel like a total asshole next to him. And I was like an English lit major, and he'd be like, "Did you read this book?" And you're like, "No."
No.
And like, "Don't ask me that." And as soon as you'd be like, "How about this book?" And you're
And
like,
there are books you should have read.
"I know," and you're like, "No, I'm an asshole. I haven't read
It's
that
like
one
every
either."
book for like the first 500 years of written literature he's read.
Yeah.
And he can talk about them. And
And met like every one of the famous Austrian economists of the past 75 years.
and
Like,
yet he didn't understand Bitcoin. And as far he just couldn't
but
get
it's
it.
like when Max and I were there in 2015, and we had lunch with his son Ricardo,
Yeah.
and then we had dinner with Hugo that night. He does, his way of saying no is no, no.
Right.
And he was like, so when Max was like, "Yeah, I talked your son into getting Bitcoin," he's like,
No.
"No, no."
Right, because it's all about the classics for him, and that always goes back to gold. I mean, he knows everything from Aristotle forward. So anything written in 2,700 years, that's a classic he's read, and so he's a gold bug. And so Bitcoin doesn't fit, and he hates it, and he missed it. But his son got it, and now he's getting rich.
And again, this is our final real ending. Somebody here says, Patrick McDermott says, "We listen because you guys are old. So much,
Exactly.
so much to learn." Thanks, Patrick.
That's right.
That makes me feel really
That's
good.
right. I may be physically old, but I'm still immature.
Well, mentally agile. Like I said, if you hang out, any of you 20-year-olds, I challenge you to go hang out with Hugo Salinas Price. He will, like, he is
He
way
was
sharper
he's
than any
also
of you.
he was up at like 3 in the morning every night, smoking cigars, drinking, telling stories. Like he's just like the Energizer Bunny. Like nothing would get this guy down. He was just like up, going, going, going. He's like, let's go to the bar and talk some more.
And it'll be like, "Have you read John Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men?" Like, "No, I saw the film." And he's like, "Right. Well, on page 326, there's a line, and he says this." And
Yeah.
like, he'll go into this long dissertation about what that line meant and what it means to today. And you're like, you just sit there just feeling like such like, hoping he doesn't notice what a deplorable you are for not having read any single book of like the entire conversation you've had that night. Like, you haven't read one of the classics that he mentions.
I
And
know.
you're
You're like, oh yeah. Well, did you see Kurt Cobain live on MTV?
right. Thank you so much. Now it's back to, it always feels like the week takes forever to go by, but it also goes by so fast. So,
It's timeshare,
I'm like a
slow and
test
fast at
pilot,
the same time.
an orange pill test pilot.
Oh, you are?
Yeah. So I have to relearn this every time. It's like, if you looked at our screen right now, it's like it's filled with all this stuff. And there's like, I've got to press one of these buttons,
Yeah.
and we'll see if I press the right one. Otherwise, you might just like hang out with us all night. That's Max's dream, to have like a 24-hour stream.
Is it? It could be. I mean, I'm happy with that. Chatting with folks. I can chat about stuff
Bye bye.
later, dudes. Da, da, da.